essence, our job and our focus is to take control of our minds. In fact, if you would please comment below, take control of your mind. Take control of your mind. As you guys are commenting below, take control of your mind. Let me set the tone and the framework ultimately for what we're going to do. Speaking of framework, in this session, I want to break down the framework of taking control of your mind. Now, many people can often find themselves trapped into a loop of negative thinking that often impacts their well being and overall performance. I want to go into depths on how we can build awareness around the negative thoughts that we often have and how we can actively reframe these thoughts in ways that will assist us in developing a more empowered mindset. Now, stick around to the end of this broadcast. I want to give you all this daily practice that you can begin to integrate that will help you build more awareness around your thoughts. I'm talking about becoming more mindful and ultimately enhancing your mental fitness. See more individuals coming in. Take control of your life. Randy, my brother from another mother. Salute to you, King. Hope all is well with you. Yes, take control of your mind. But that being said, let's go ahead and dive into it. Now, to kind of really paint the picture for us, let me help us gain an understanding on how negative thoughts often work. Now, Randy, growing up, Randy and I, we trained together in the boxing gym. And before I really started getting real heavy into competing in the sport of boxing, the sport that I had fallen in love with was the sport of basketball. Now, mind you, growing up in the time and in the era in which I was growing up, the person that was really leading the pack as it relates to the NBA was, of course, Kobe Bean Bryant, right? Rest in peace to Kobe Bryant. But, you know, Kobe really was an inspiration for my generation. You know, I can recall being in school, and anytime you had a piece of trash and you were shooting it into the trash can, right? You know, we would often call out Kobe, right? Because we were inspired by Kobe and ultimately that Mamba mentality that he brought to the sport. Very entertaining, very athletic, and ultimately really one of the greatest that have ever done it, arguably, right? You know, that's up for a further discussion at a later session or different broadcast. But nonetheless, I bring up Kobe because the other day on my YouTube feed, there was a game, a highlight reel that popped up. And this game, coincidentally, we got a lot of people from Atlanta tapped into the broadcast. This was against the Atlanta Hawks, right? I believe the date was March 13th, 2013, if I'm not mistaken, when they played the Atlanta Hawks, the Los Angeles Lakers, if you don't know that Kobe played for the LA Lakers. But nonetheless, to kind of give us some context, right? This is 2013, which was a very difficult year for the Los Angeles Lakers. In fact, I believe they had 3 different coaches in that year. And at the same time, they were kind of experimenting with their roster. This is when they went and acquired a seasoned Steve Nash. And I use that word seasoned intentionally. To paraphrase that, many people often thought that Steve Nash did not have any more gas in his tank. He was a little older, and they acquired him in hopes that he can lead the point guard position. And then they also had a post-back surgery Dwight Howard, right, who wasn't necessarily the same Howard that played for the Orlando Magic, so to speak. But nonetheless, to kind of paint the picture, Kobe Bryant literally had the Lakers on his shoulders. And in this particular game, it was interesting, right? Because initially, he steps into the arena. Now, mind you, this is Atlanta. This is the State Farm Arena, and there's over 17,000 people within this arena. And there's hecklers. They're booing him. I mean, they're throwing all kind of shots verbally at Kobe Bryant. But ultimately, it was very interesting to see the dynamic that began to shift as Kobe Bryant began to dominate on the court. I'm talking about being double teamed and triple teamed, especially in the third quarter. And what began to happen was the boos turned into MVP chants. Now, mind you, this man is out there, and this is not his hometown. He's playing an away game. And initially there's boos, and because of the way that he performed, right, he stayed focused on his mission at hand. And I'll get to that here in a moment. But again, the boos and the hecklers were overshadowed and overpowered by the MVP chants, right? And he led his team. I believe he had like 31 points that game. And I watched this interview, at the end of the game on this highlight reel, and they said, Kobe, man, it was a very hectic and chaotic environment here. How were you able to stay focused? And Kobe's response was simply, listen, my responsibility is to focus on the mission, and the mission is to win. Everybody comment below. My mission is to win. Again, he said, my responsibility, it's my personal responsibility to stay focused on the mission. And my mission is to win. Now, someone may be asking, well, D1, where are you going with this? Why are you bringing this into the conversation? I'm bringing this into the conversation because every single day, we each find ourselves in a similar environment. Now, we may not be stepping on the basketball court to perform like a basketball player, but in the arena of life, we often step into situations and circumstances where in our mind, there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of boos. There's a lot of self-criticism that's happening. In fact, psychology researchers have estimated on every single day, we think about 50 to 70,000 thoughts every day. Now, of those thoughts, 70% of those thoughts can be categorized as negative. Again, similar situation where you step into an environment and the vast majority of people are expecting you to fail. The vast majority of the thoughts that we are thinking on a continuous basis are negative. They're not supporting our goals. They're not supporting our confidence. They're not building up our self-esteem. In many cases, we have to understand, family, that negative thinking is an internal dialogue that's often promoting like a belittling narrative, self-sabotage, and us criticizing ourselves, which often can translate in many cases to like depressive rumination, anxious worries, again, that self-critique and self-sabotage and personal attacks. And this often manifests in statements like, I'm not enough, or I can't do this, I can't handle this, or I'm a failure, or in some cases, nobody likes me, nobody loves me, or nobody cares about me. Now, if you are taking notes, write this down. It's important for us to understand this concept, family. Negative self-talk is not an accurate representation of reality, but it's a distortion that is influenced by our experiences, our emotional state, and the story that we are telling ourselves. Let me say that again for the people in the back in case we missed that, okay? Negative self-talk is not a true representation of what's happening in reality, but instead it is a distortion that is largely influenced by the emotional state that you are in, your past experiences, and the story that you tell yourself, right? Think about past experiences, our failures, our embarrassments, the times that we've made mistakes. This is often triggering a lot of our negative thinking because when we come across a scenario that's very similar to what we've experienced in our past, it provokes those same negative thoughts, right? Think about like societal expectations where we're expected to show up a certain type of way. We're expected to think like the crowd thinks. We're expected to have certain ideologies or certain philosophies. And when we go against the norm, a lot of times our negative thought patterns can start kicking in where we feel inadequate or inferior or not loved or we're isolated. We got to be aware of these triggers, right? We have to be mindful of how our mind can go on this negative path automatically and in many cases involuntarily. So here's what we need to do. What we have to learn to do is to become more mindful of what we are thinking. Everybody comment below. Change starts within. Change starts within. And then bear with me, y'all. I'm still adjusting to this new format since the video went down for us, but we're going to make it work. So I got pop-ups coming left and right on the screen. But as you guys are commenting below, change starts within. Here's our goal. Our goal is to think in ways that inspires confidence. Our goal and our mission is to think in ways that build our self-esteem, because keep in mind, we will only rise to the level of success that our self-esteem can absorb. And this begins with us developing a more empowering narrative, more empowering self-talk that will support the vision and the purpose and the goals that we have. There's a quote by James Allen where he once said, "The thoughts that you used to think have brought you to where you are now. But where you are tomorrow is dependent upon the thoughts that you think from this day forward." What if you, for that person that may be struggling with negative thinking, right? What if you can break this habit of negative thoughts and start adopting a new habit of thinking more positively? What if you stop being this personal inner critic, right? And instead became a supportive coach that began to empower you to do things and take on certain situations or approach risk with a different mindset? What if you can remove yourself from this victim language and instead start adopting the language of empowerment? What would your life look like? Here's what it's going to take, family. Everybody comment below. It's going to take attention, focus, and intention, right? Attention, focus, and intention, okay? Now, a few caveats as we're entering into some strategies, some practical steps that we can begin to take. Here's something that I want to put into the atmosphere, right? I want to plant a seed in your consciousness. When we talk about negative thinking, let me see how I'm going to phrase this. The key to us overcoming negative thinking is for us to understand that you can't stop it, right? I know that sounds crazy, like, D1, how are we going to have a conversation about destroying negative thoughts? But here it is, you're saying that we cannot stop them. No, we can't stop them, right? This is a misconception that many people often have where they think, well, I just want to stop thinking certain thoughts. No. If I was to tell you right now, hey, Mia, hey, Bruce, don't think of a pink elephant. Right now, whatever you do, think on something else. Don't think on a pink elephant. Right now, I'm quite sure you're envisioning in your mind, even though I'm telling you not to do this, you see a pink elephant, right? It's hard for you to stop thinking about certain things, right? Because ultimately, what you resist in your mind will often persist in your mind. So the key is not for us to stop the negative thinking. Here's the key. It's for us to change the relationship that we have with certain thoughts, right? When you start changing the relationship that you have with negative thoughts, what begins to happen is they no longer have the same influence and impact on you, right? So even though this thought arises, I'm not influenced by it, right? We all experience negative thinking, but that's not to say that you have to be controlled by that thought, right? You get to decide which thoughts you're going to give mental consent to. And that's the key for us destroying these negative thoughts in ways that we can reframe them into a more empowering perspective. Does this make sense, family? Put a number one in the comments if you're picking up what I'm putting down. Kelly, I see you in the building. Yes, Michelle, attention, focus, and intention. Absolutely, Mia. As soon as I see those comments coming through, we'll dive into some framework. Excellent, excellent. Jody, I see you. Welcome. So here's the first step. The first step to us destroying these negative thoughts and ultimately working to reframe them. Everybody comment below, identify the thought. Identify the thought. Here's what I challenge us to do. Grab your notepad, right? Maybe even open up your notes app, but I would recommend actually grabbing a physical notepad and writing these things down. Studies have proven when you write things down, it has a different impact on your mindset, your perspective, and ultimately the change that you're aiming to create, right? But write down any negative thought that begins to arise that makes you feel some type of way, right? Maybe you feel like you're a failure, write it down. Maybe you feel like you're not good enough, write it down. What begins to happen when you identify these thoughts out the gate, right? Negativity loses its power when you shine a light on it, right? In many cases, right, negative thoughts, fear, doubt, insecurities, imposter syndrome, it has its influence on us because it's operating on a subconscious level, right? It's not being detected. It's creeping in involuntarily. What we begin to do when we write things down, we're building awareness around certain thought patterns. Now I can gain a deeper understanding of what's triggering this thought. I can begin to identify when this thought begins to arise. This positions me to be more empowered. Keep in mind, family, if you're taking notes, write this down. Self-awareness is the first step to self-empowerment. When you start becoming aware of the thoughts that are influencing you and the emotional states that you consistently find yourself in, now you can position yourself to create the positive change and the positive outcomes that you're aiming to experience. But it begins with awareness and mindfulness. Identify the thought. Even get some people involved. Recruit some people that will support you on this mission of you reinventing your mindset, right? Maybe it's your spouse or significant other. Maybe it's a coworker. Have them call you out when you begin to say things that are disempowering, right? Have them make notes. Say, hey, let me know anytime you hear something come out of my mouth that doesn't sound positive. It sounds negative. If I'm blaming people, if I'm criticizing myself, right? If I'm taking on the role of a victim, have them call you out so you can write these things down. That's number one. Identify the thought. Second step is this. Here's what I want us to do. I want you to challenge that thought. Here's where the power lives, family, okay? Because when you repeat a thought in your mind over and over again without challenging it, it gains persuasive power. It gains more influence over you, right? There's a quote from Hitler where he once said, if you tell a lie big enough, loud enough, and long enough, sooner than later you'll begin to believe it. But when you begin to challenge this thought, it loses its influence over you. When you begin to challenge this thought, what I'm saying is this. As you've written down these thoughts, right, on this note card, every single evening, here's what I challenge you to do. Before you lay your head down, before you go to sleep, I want you to review these thoughts, and I want you to take these thoughts to court. Everybody comment below, take your thoughts to court. I want you to be that FBI agent that's interrogating that suspect, right? I want you to be that person that's diving deeper into getting the truth of what's being said about you, right? And as you are looking over these things that you've written in your notepad, ask yourself questions like, is there evidence that supports this thought? Is there evidence that does not support this thought? Is this thought a fact or is this thought an assumption, right? Would I say this thought to a friend? Would a friend say this to me? Are there alternative ways for me to look at the situation at hand that created this thought, right? Ultimately, what's happening when you begin to challenge these thoughts, you're going to get to the root of truth, right? And negativity, family, it often tries to blind itself as being true. And this is why we buy into it, right? I'm not good enough. Well, hold on. Think about the things that you've overcome from your past. Think about the things that you once thought were going to take you out, but you figured out how to become resourceful and rise above that situation and found out how to win. Think about how the odds were stacked against you. This is how you challenge that thought. So again, this negative thought does not gain persuasive power over you. Now, to put the icing on the cake, we're going to go to step number